Welcome to the Brewing Fiction Podcast. In this episode, after overcoming a multitude of technical challenges, we bring you a conversation with Cecelia Tichi, the award winning author of the Val and Roddy Gilded Age Mystery Series. Cecelia shares her insights on the craft of writing, traditional and self publishing, and her latest book, A Gilded Redwood Coffin, released on January 28th, 2025. If you enjoy historical fiction or mystery crime, this episode is for you. Welcome to another edition of the Brewing Fiction Podcast. Today I'm joined by award-winning mystery crime author Cecelia Tichi. Welcome to the show, Cecelia. It is a pleasure to meet you.
Hello, Keith. Great to be here.
Fabulous. I'm glad we could connect today. Cecelia, you are in, Tennessee? Is that where you're
in
located?
Nashville, Tennessee.
Oh, fabulous. I wish I were with you.
Okay.
I've always wanted to go.
It's a beautiful day here and, a long, slow autumn. I was told when I moved here, it's the best season in Nashville. And indeed, that's the case.
Is that true? So how long have you lived there?
Since 87.
Oh, okay. You're
way back. But you're never a native. This is the South. Who are your people? And so you
true?
Came from Boston, Massachusetts. Whoa.
Yeah. Well, you know what? So I'm a Newfoundlander, but I'm living in Saskatchewan now. So see, I feel the same.
So You've moved from the sea to the wheat.
We have indeed. Yeah. And you know what? My wife reminds me all the time that there's not enough water here. She's a Newfoundlander as well. So she's from right on the ocean. She's from Bonavista. I don't know if you've ever been to Newfoundland, but it's like right on the coast.
No, from Halifax and the Maritimes, a tour there, and I regret the opportunity, and I didn't take it, to extend the trip for a few days and go to Newfoundland. And of course, you're now a literature celebrity.
Right. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, you know what? Let's jump right into the podcast here. So we're going to step into Author's Corner, and I'm going to turn the mic over to you. You're going to tell me a little more about yourself, and then we'll have a little fun with Fast Five. So feel free to share who you are. Yeah.
Okay. Well, my name is Cecelia Tichi, Tichi. Originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the Gilded Age steel mills began. So there was Andrew Carnegie, and of course the great oil power Rockefeller, and steel and oil and Frick, with the Coke mills. So a lot of wealth in Pittsburgh, originally back in the Gilded Age, when the Steelers really meant the steel mills. And let me say, for the last bunch of years in the classroom and in the library at Vanderbilt University, with the name Vanderbilt, a Gilded Age name because Commodore Cornelius Vanderbilt, founder of Vanderbilt University, and its namesake, he was a mogul in transportation, steamboats, steamships, and then railroads. At one point, the Vanderbilt rail lines controlled all the lines east of the Mississippi River in the U.S. So in a sense, I feel I have been in the first Gilded Age from birth until my classroom work. But let me just mention, if you Google Gilded Age, you get as many references to our current years as to that 100 years plus ago. And the reason, a lot of political turmoil, a lot of tech that the public was struggling to catch up with when the horse-drawn carts, wagons, carriages gave way to the horseless carriages and the motor cars. It was an enormous change. When the farms gave way to the factories and mills, um, who who manned the shop, so to speak?
Mhm.
Right now, we're still coping with figuring out. Here comes artificial intelligence
Right.
swooping into our lives. So there is a kind of parallel between the first Gilded Age and the last one. And what my mystery novels try to do is situate a reader in that first Gilded Age with its own strife, coping with fast change, and let's see what might be mirrored to our own day. Keith, there's a sentence I put into mind. We live in history, and history lives in us. And that I don't know where it came from, but I think it's true, and
Oh
I
yeah.
live by it. So
Indeed,
that's
indeed.
yeah,
That is
yeah,
a words to live by.
right. And let me just quickly mention, I've written a good number of books as from being a professor, but a book on 7 individuals who really saw the perils of a Gilded Age and tried to activate their lives and careers for education, for just for food, shelter, and clothing for America, because they saw a lack of training and schooling could only lead to crime.
Mm,
So I've been thinking about these issues for a long time. They have a lighter touch in a mystery novel, but they're there also.
okay.
So, all right,
Okay.
enough about me.
Well, thanks for sharing that. We'll get to know a lot more about you as the episode goes on for sure. All right, we're going to have a little bit of fun here. I'm going to
Yeah.
do what we call Fast Five. First things first. Let's do this one. Since you're an expert in cocktails, I noticed you've written a couple of fun books there of cocktails. So, which do you prefer, beer or wine?
All right. I have to jump over the brewery and the vineyard and get to the distillery.
There
I'm
you
sorry to
go.
tell you,
Yeah,
I'm violating the Fast Five rule right off the bat.
right from the start.
And the
You're a
reason is,
troublemaker. I can see that. Hey.
well, I've got a reason. My characters, it's a love of their life married couple. He is a Knickerbocker gentleman of 5 generations in the Eastern Seaboard. Now he's a lawyer by training, and
Mhm.
he defends taverns and bars from the temperance crowd, while on the side, he's become a master mixologist.
Okay.
He is inventing cocktails, mixed drinks. So he's got whiskeys and gin, bourbon, scotch, brandy too, and rum on his mind. So at dinner, of course, he and his wife, his name is Roderick DeVere, he's Roddy,
Roddy.
and he selects the wine, and it's a very good cellar that he maintains, and he drinks ale, and the problem for his wife, Valentine McEldevier, she's a silver heiress from the West, and she finds that ladies are not permitted to have cocktails. Why is it? The board feet of etiquette books allow the ladies to have endless champagnes and punches and liqueurs, but they say nothing about cocktails. And so when the lady wants a cocktail, with a wink, she orders, quote unquote, a cup of tea, and the cocktail is served secretly in a teacup.
Okay.
So, yes, there is wine at every dinner, sometimes lunch.
Hmm.
Champagne, it's the tap water of the upper class. Um, and Roddy drinks ale. It's not to his wife Val's taste.
Okay.
But one of these days, in one of these books, and I think the newest one I'm just beginning to work on,
Okay.
she's going to go into Delmonico's or Sherry's restaurant in New York City and order herself an old fashioned, which is my favorite drink,
Okay.
cocktail.
So you'd have to choose tea if she kind of wink wink orders tea, right? So we go
She
back to
does.
coffee and tea. Yeah, we'll just say tea is the answer.
Well, Roddy is the tea drinker in the morning. Val likes a good strong cup of black coffee.
Cat or dog?
Well, because the mystery novels feature a French bulldog named Velvet, who just happens to be the Frenchie in my own house
Is
named
that?
Velvet.
Love
We've
it.
got it. We've got to do dog, but a very close friend is a cat person, and we admire her cats. So there it is.
It's interesting to hear that you have your dog is a character in your novels. I love it when writers do that. I spoke with Elizabeth Chatsworth 3-4 weeks ago, and she has Boo as a character in her novels. So, and that's her own dog. Fabulous. I love it. I love it.
Right.
All right, standalone novels or a series?
Well, standalone within a series.
Okay.
I feel kind of burdened as a reader when I have to start with number one and work my way up.
Yes.
So anybody could start with my first gilded novel, A Gilded Death, but pick any one of the soon to be seven, and as a standalone, that works just fine. And then you
Perfect.
can backtrack or you can go forward from wherever you were. But let me just mention for the author, it's if you're committed to standalone status, your book has to set up the terms pretty early. Who are these people and what are they about and what's their current problem? That means that a reader who is interested in the series and is going from one to the next um, can't be bored thinking, oh, I already read this,
Hmm.
the last one. So there's a repeated challenge to set it up in a way that readers who've been there before will be will find something new, something refreshing, and that's to be worked on every single time for the readers. Yeah.
Right. Great advice. And do you prefer plot driven or character driven stories?
Well, much as I admire a clockwork's mechanical mystery, I like character driven ones. Um, Kinsey Mulholland from the whole Alphabet series, um, or for that matter, John Le Carre's characters, the George Smileys. I get invested in the
In
characters, and
characters.
I want my readers to be invested in my characters too. They're not purely spun out of fiction. My Val, a silver heiress, her father has to be John Mackay, an Irish immigrant who went west and became, from his skillful silver mining, one of the richest men in the world. That's her papa. And as for Val herself, where would she come from? From the story of an excellent one of Evelyn Walsh McLean, who grew up in the mining camps of Colorado. And here's what I really like about her, and here's why I could fashion my Val from her. Evelyn Walsh, when she became one of the richest women in the world, she never forgot the names and the lives of the 30 servants in her mansion. She never forgot where she came from, and she said in her memoir, Papa struck it rich. She used to sleep in sub-zero weather, in itchy wool union suits under a bearskin rug, even as she now sleeps on satin sheets. She didn't let go of her past for the sake of her present, and that means everything to my character.
Fabulous. It's a good lesson in life. We all should remember where we've come from.
You bet.
Yeah. Okay, and lastly, for Fast Five, would you prefer writing in a bustling cafe or a quiet library?
I wish I could do the cafe. And
Yes.
I know people who do the
I
cafe.
don't understand how they can, but yeah.
And the Scottish crime novelist Ian Rankin, in an interview recently, said he has music on when he's writing. I can't have anything on except me, my head in the Gilded Age, my French bulldog sleeping, I hope not snoring,
At your
on a
feet.
cushion right under my writing stand,
Yeah.
and I need to have it quiet, and there it is, and there's the Fast Five.
There's the
Love
Fast
those.
Five. Thank you very much, Cecilia. Appreciate it. All right. Well, that's a little bit of fun and a little bit more about Cecilia. And we're going to jump right into the interview. And of course, you're a professor of English. So, what inspired you to start writing?
Let me backtrack. Way back in the Wayback Machine. Uh, I have always liked writing. And even from my graduate school days,
Mhm.
I was trying out novels, all of which are long shredded or rotting in a landfill. Um, and so in academic life, you have to learn academies, I'll call it.
Okay.
I have always hoped that in my academic writing, I might I might be able to write precisely and with research in the background, but also for a wider audience. And this happened to me probably later. I'll pinpoint a book on Jack London, and I was thinking that man needs a book of his own. He shouldn't be one of a bunch of books or an honorable mention in any number of scholars' books. So I began to read his work. That man who lived only to be 40, and died of kidney failure
Mm.
because in a South Sea venture with infections that beset him and his crew, he treated everybody with something called chromium sublimate that cannot be expelled by the kidneys, and it eventually killed him. But he produced 50 books. I mean, the man was a whirlwind of writing. Well, I was thinking he deserves readers, not in academe only, but in the general public.
Yeah.
And so I was approached by a literary agent named Deirdre Mullane. And she said, I see you're working on a book on Jack London. I represent scholars who also like to write. Would you be interested? And through Deirdre's help, I was able to write the book whose subtitle is A Writer's Fight for a Better America. And I like to think it's readable. And so at about that time, and I'm talking about the 20 teens, and after after that book, and it's been, it's published and it's make its way. I still get some checks for royalties. But the same wonderful literary agent Deirdre called me up and said, Cecelia, she said, Julian Fellows has been under contract for a television series on the Gilded Age. It's been under contract for a long time. It's going to happen. You are my one client who might write a book I'm thinking of what would Mrs. Astor do?
Right.
It would be a book on what in the Gilded Age, what were they wearing? What did they eat? What were their parties like? What did they do in the summertime? Where did they go abroad? What about their yachts? Well, I signed on. And while sort of it could be looked into at any point, not from beginning to end, you can jump in anywhere for the sections,
Right.
and
Right.
then of course the cocktail books. But I began at the same time to think, what about a Gilded Age mystery series? Who would the main characters be, and where would they live, and where would they have come from, and what would they be interested in? And could I bring into these mystery novels
Yeah.
some of these social issues swirling in that time and ours? Um, what constituted education? How could these child laborers grow up and make a living once they outgrew child labor? And how could I give this a light touch with snake oil medicines filled with opium? Um, could this be possible? And so I began. And the first of the novels, A Gilded Death, and that started me on the series, Keith.
Okay.
So, and there went, and as I eased toward emerita retirement status from Vanderbilt University, I found myself writing for a public outside the academy. Um, First with the book on my 7 people who saw the problems of the first Gilded Age and worked industrial medicine, what was this about? Anyway, not to go on and on, into Gilded Age mystery novels that could be worth time and attention for a reader.
Right. So, what would Mrs. Astor do was your introduction to now what 2, 4, 6, and currently working on your seventh.
I actually my 7th will come out at the end of January, and I have just begun to work on number 8.
Oh wow! Look at you.
But let me say that yes, the Gilded Age. What is it? A set of decades following the United States Civil War, ending in 1865, but in the 1870s, great fortunes began to be made. And on into the beginning of World War I, the First World War in 1914. Those are the decades considered the Gilded Age. Now, also called the Age of Enterprise, the age of steam and steel, the age of big business. The reason that Gilded Age stuck is that the title of an 1873 novel by Mark Twain, The Gilded Age, A Tale of Today, and it was co-authored by a man who was much better known at the time than Samuel Clemens, who had dubbed himself Mark Twain, Charles
Mhm.
Dudley Warner. Um, it's really the title that stuck because of gilded, glittering and gleaming on the surface, but underneath the base metal. And that is, of course, child labor,
Hmm.
struggles for suffrage, wages barely sufficient to keep a worker alive. And what was a working person's capital? The body. Put that body through stresses and strains of 12, 14-hour days, 6 days a week, maybe six and a half. The capital is exhausted by late 30s, maybe 40. The average life expectancy at the turn of the century in the United States was about 40 years old. So, gilded, the term gilded, shiny on the surface, the ultra rich, living it up um, in the Upper East Side, in their mansions, and summers in what are now termed the cottages in Newport. Um, but the workers supporting this high gilded layer, very thin layer, the workers were, well, shall we say, burdened and haunted and even doomed.
So they were abused for sure. So the word kind of hides the true aspect of what was
Yeah,
happening back in
yeah,
those days.
yeah.
Because I wanted to ask you a question about the inspiration, like if there was an author or literary works that influenced you. Is that book by Mark Twain maybe the influence that I'm asking for, or
Actually, no, Keith.
okay,
It's a terrible novel.
okay,
Now, let me say it's got in it all the issues of the Gilded Age. I mean, it's got lobbyists in the corridors of Washington D.C. in the Capitol. It's got con men, and it's got sort of lascivious, conniving women. But the storyline doesn't hold together. It's
okay.
a kind of a haul to read. Um, I would say I would say that Jack London,
Hmm.
The Call of the Wild, is a novel, a short novel, and it's one that established his reputation at the turn of the century, 1903. He didn't make much money. He agreed to sell it for a flat $2,000, and the interest it earned for the Macmillan Company was probably still earning. But here's
Wow.
what I saw in that novel. Here is the hero dog, Buck, who's put through terrible stresses and strains. He's sold up into the gold rush country in the Yukon, badly treated. And here's what Jack London, who spent a winter in that Yukon, saw. He saw that the animal stories, Aesop's fables, the tortoise and the hare, the fox and the hunt, all those animal stories could be configured to tell the public about the conditions of the workers of his America. He grew up poor in Oakland, California. His mother ran boarding houses. His stepfather, whose lungs were damaged in the Civil War, was a great farmer, but he couldn't make a go of it. Jack found himself on his own. He was a boy worker trying to escape. Uh, Keith, I, I hate to say that a little bit of my family life touched base with some of that, my
Okay.
early life. But here's what Jack London was able to show his readers in Animal Fables. Those sled dogs of his in Call of the Wild, um, hitched to the sled, strapped in. They were underfed. They were overworked. One died and had to be just cast out into the snow. They were fighting for their lives. And the hero dog, Buck, did survive and make his way into the wild. And at the end, we see his progeny, and they're alive, and their hints are that they are thriving, that they have mates, that life goes on generation. That's the book that caught my attention.
Wow. Okay. There you go. Do you think someday you'd explore another genre? Like you're starting on book 8 in your mystery novels. Do you think you'll ever step into another genre, or have you and we haven't
You know,
spoken of it
I'm
yet?
I'm I'm not seeing it, but I will say this about number 8. The first 7 books, and 7 is popping in as again end of January.
Here, right?
It's already got some reviews on Barnes and Noble, and I'm relieved to say the readers are liking it.
Good.
It is so end of January. A Gilded Redwood Coffin is the title. But here's something I've decided to do. The first 7 books are set in 1898 and 99. At the end of the new one, Val, in the horseless carriage era, she's interested in learning to drive one of these new horseless carriages. In number 8, I am jumping ahead to 1902. Val has already been driving an 8-horsepower Fiat, and she wants a new Mercedes, the most powerful car on the planet, and there's a reason she wants it. So I'm not going to say any more about the plot, but when you ask, am I going to branch out into something else, I'll say for now, I've jumped 3 years ahead. Motor cars have taken to the road. People are driving. And what's coming up for Val and Roddy DeVere? Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Okay. Share a little bit about your writing process. So, obviously, again, you're a professor of English. You can probably teach all of our listeners a whole pile. Share a little bit about your writing process as a professional. How'd you find the time to write? When do you like
Well,
to write? Those kinds of things.
Keith, let me say that I have eased into emerita status. So
Okay.
I am, in the last couple of years, I am not teaching students. I will tell you, I miss being in the classroom with young people. It was the best part. Not grading papers. It's stressful to evaluate students' papers and tell them and be forced to tell them what they need to do better. All of it, and the meetings, all of it. But my process, I'm a morning person, and so my black coffee and a light breakfast, and I'm at the keyboard with Velvet the Frenchie on the
Yeah.
and so what it encourages me to know that Ernest Hemingway only managed to get 2 pages a day. Once in a while I can do better, but mostly it's my 2 pages, and I'm editing as I go along, and sometimes I have to set up a file called extra for each book, and I'll tell you that some thousands of words end up in extra.
Okay.
From blind alleys, cul-de-sacs, wrong turns, being too dull, being too, rabbit holes. I think every writer will confess, rabbit hole.
Right.
But I take I don't know whether it's inspiration or just a good spiritual message from a no longer living, mostly mystery writer from Alabama named Anne George. She said, "When I see my finished book, I can't remember the days when I've gone down to my writing studio and nothing worked out for me. And it's just close it up. The day was lost." And there are days like this when they just are. But what I do mostly in the morning is the best of it. After lunch, I go up, and frankly, there are times when I just stay up there too long. I might stand up and work the barbells at the other end of the room. Okay, fine. But what I do in the mornings is plus or minus, and that's it. I like to think as the months go on, as I look out the window and see leaves turning, bare branches, snow, and then some little green sprigs, that there's some greening going on with me too. but
Okay.
that's the process.
Great advice on there's a certain time when you should stop and going too far. I felt that, and I'm a very very green writer myself, and I find even after a couple of hours, I'm like, oh, I want to get to 1,000 words, or I want to get to 2,000 words.
And Keith, isn't it sometimes the best is a phrase
Right?
that you do, a
Yeah,
phrase, and that's worth everything. It's the gold nugget of the day.
agreed.
Mm.
Okay, so you've done a ton of research about the Gilded Age for your novel specifically. Did you learn some of that earlier in say your professional career, or has that research only been done since you started writing?
It started before I knew I was going to write a
Okay,
series of mystery novels. Long before I
fair.
found myself at Vanderbilt University, drawn to that period of the late 1800s, the literature of Edith Wharton, and she's writing from the upper class. She's exposing their foibles and their flaws and some of their triumphs, earned and unearned.
Hmm.
And then there's Mark Twain, um, and his vernacular, and then of course Jack London in that same era, from the bottom up. And I found myself teaching in that era, teaching a course, for instance, called He Said, She Said. And that's Jack London and Edith Wharton, both
Okay, okay,
very, prolific writers.
yeah.
And of course, using the library, Vanderbilt's library, wonderful, but also buying a lot of books. And when you asked about my writing process, I am right now, as I talk to you, surrounded by about 2,000 books,
Okay,
um, of which probably 300 are the core. But I spring up and get, for instance, a book on the Boy Scouts. And why is that? Because my character, Val, is going to establish a summer camp for poor children, sort of a fresh air fund. And
mm,
I need to know more about camping. And I've
there you
got
go.
this book on scouting, and I go right to it.
So
And
you're not gonna take a weekend camping trip to figure it out.
so my husband and I have done our camping, and I never could sleep a wink, lying in that tent, listening to those noises outside, imagining the worst. There were probably, I don't know, raccoons, but I imagined bears and wildcats and all of that. And so, been there, done that. It's not my
Better
area.
to research it than to do it.
Yes, yes, yes.
Fair enough. Okay. Now, you've also visited a lot of places that you write about. So, again, part of your research or afterward, you like to visit some of the sites and some of the places that you featured in the series, correct?
If as a writer and you have a historical project and you are able to go to that place, by gosh, save your pennies and go there.
Yeah.
I am reliant upon, of course, Jack London's Oakland, California, and the Last Chance Saloon. It's right on the edge of the water on Jack London Square. In the 1906 earthquake, the pylons driven down into the mud and the rock, got jarred, and the floor of that saloon, which is still in operation, you
Okay.
go in there, have a beer. There you go, beer,
Beer.
a brewery, and that floor is slanted, and that's where Jack London had. He went on Sundays with his stepfather. He had lemonade. His stepfather had a whiskey. It is the bartender owner who lent Jack London the money for his 1 year at the University of California at Berkeley.
Wow.
Um, and after that, he didn't have any more money. He didn't see his way clear to benefit. Um, but yes, so Jack London Square, and then up to Virginia City, Nevada. And that's where I have at Silver City, in the Silver State. Um, it's like an authentic Disneyland and I don't say that. I'm cringing when I say Disneyland because it's a historic silver mining town,
Right.
and it's a tourist site. And I wish one of those tech moguls would invest some money to repair the board sidewalk, and to bring in some restoration people and give Virginia City the help it needs. It's a wonderful place. You can go into a mine. We did that
Wow.
shaft,
Yeah.
see what it was like. You can go into and watch the operation of the ore being milled into silver bars. You can
Wow.
see that.
Okay.
um, and so do that, and that's where my character Val came from. And you can take the little train restored
Yeah.
into the mining country. Oh yeah. Anyway, and also I have been, of course, to New York City because Val and Roddy live at 620 Fifth Avenue, and right across there, Fifth Avenue, is Central Park. And you've got to, refresh your memory, go there.
Of
And
course. Yeah.
also Newport, where they spend their summers. And I have given an address in the evening in the Gold Room at Marble House, one of the Vanderbilt cottages in Newport, restored by the Newport Restoration Society, Historical Society, Newport County Historical Society. They've done a wonderful job fundraising. They had help from the Doris Duke, from her and her foundation,
Right.
and in New York City, so many of the mansions have been razed. I mean, completely gone. Mrs. Astor's house site um, is now the site of a synagogue, and so it's repurposed for very good use. But the structures that remain from the Gilded Age are in Newport, Rhode Island, and well worth the visit. So I've been to all of them repeatedly to Newport. I now have friends in Newport. And so, yes, if you're writing historical fiction, go to the places where your characters live, play, work, and solve crimes.
Walk in their shoes. Right.
Yep, yep.
Wow. Cool. Okay. Let's talk about your books in general. Are they self published or traditionally published?
They are they are self-published. Here's why. And
Okay.
let me say, I don't recommend it. Okay.
Okay. Great. This is the
here's
purpose of the podcast. Yeah.
Well, here's why, Keith. But let me say, my wonderful literary agent, Deirdre Mullane, whom I
Yeah.
mentioned earlier in our
Right.
podcast, Deirdre was very interested in the first one, A Gilded Death. She saw it through editing. I learned a lot about what she did from it and carried forward. Deirdre found that sending it out as as a solid novel, she didn't get any replies. It's not She didn't get no's. She just didn't get anything.
Anything. Okay.
And when she sent out Mrs. Astor and the cocktail books, she said, like all the nonfiction proposals. Now let me back up for a word about what an agent does,
Yeah. Yeah. Please.
because I think writers mistakenly, and I was one, thought, oh, an agent is interested. You send the agent your manuscript,
Right.
and the agent sends the manuscript out to publishing houses. Wrong. The agent likes what you're doing,
Yeah.
but the agent has to fashion what you're doing into a proposal to a publisher.
Huh.
The proposal needs to be, in vulgar terms, a pitch. It has to have an account of the competing books on the marketplace are and have been recently, how well they've sold, who will the audience be, how old, women, men, young, old, mid-range,
Right.
what?
Yeah.
Who will it particularly appeal to in this reader group? And so what I'm talking about is the time the agent has to put into developing the proposal. Time is money for a literary agent.
Right.
They are going to live off the 15% of your royalties. 15%. If your book hits it big, well, that 15% is a lot. But if your book is kind of midway,
Right.
That 15 will be helpful, but you're not going to live on it. So what Deirdre told me is when I send out a nonfiction proposal, in 2 weeks, I get yes, no, or maybe. But when I send out fiction,
Yeah.
it seems to evaporate into the ether. So I said, I'm going to have to go to Amazon. She said, all the best.
Yeah.
Now,
No hard
I
feelings.
wish no, oh no. And she and I are still in touch and,
Okay.
we
Yeah.
think about things together.
Yeah.
But um, I would say if I had it to do over, I would look for a different agent, somebody already representing period fiction,
Mm.
and what historical period and who would best be the publisher. I would not self-publish. Here's the reason why: you have too much work to do on your own. And you cannot get into libraries, and that is a very substantial sale.
Right.
And you can't really get into bookstores on display tables. You can get special orders, and some of my readers do go to Barnes and Noble and order special, or they'll go to Amazon and order an ebook or a paperback.
Right.
And ebooks make me more money than the paperbacks.
Is that true?
And
Okay.
and I have on my own hired a marketing guy, Rick Light, Lite, and his company is Stress Free Book Marketing, and he has helped. But I feel I made a mistake, and Rick is urging me to look for an agent who will take up the series and look for a publisher who will put it out properly, not sort of my kind of homemade from from my house.
Okay.
So self-publishing, if you're interested in just friends and family and having something that you can identify as your book, go for it. But for a writer hoping to reach readers at a broader way, I would say be patient, look for an agent, get one you feel you can trust, and give yourself that time.
All right. Thanks for that advice. Self publishing versus traditional. Your advice is try and find an agent and do traditional. So, with self publishing, I love your covers. They seem to go with the theme of the book and the age. Are those self created or did you have a book cover
No,
creator?
no, thank you for asking. I like them too. I like
Yeah.
them a lot.
Yeah. I like them a lot.
Um, they were done by the company. So, if you're going to self-publish, who is the publisher? I mean, unless
Yeah.
you're putting it out of your garage. Um, I'm in a writers group, and I advise writers groups for all writers. And I think they flourish all over the country, and you get advice that you never would have thought. Oh yeah, great. One of my fellow writers group members is a former nurse and nutritionist, and she wrote a book called From Chaos to Calm. It's a self-help book, uh, and put out by uh, an Atlanta-based company called JERA, Jera. J-E-R-A.
Jera.
J-E-R-A.
Okay,
Jira.
Jira.
And it's run by a woman named Kimberly Martin. And I liked the cover of the self-help book, and I went to Kimberly Martin at Jira, and it's she who has done all the production work
Wow.
for a very reasonable price, I feel, including the cover designer, and this latest one, a redwood, gilded redwood coffin, done by a man named John. He's done a lot of book designs, and he's picked up from another designer who went a different way, but they all seem to me to be kind of in harmony with each other.
Okay.
Good colors, good designs, and so Jira has produced. Let me mention this too for anybody who's possibly going to self-publishing or through an agent. It is important to have page readability, and that means a typeface that's big enough and spaces between the lines.
Yeah.
Your readers will be of all ages, including younger readers who, it's recently been reported, are afflicted with nearsightedness because of too much screen time.
Right.
So sometimes publishers seem to want to skimp on costs. The print is too small. The space is barely visible between the lines. I pick up a book in a bookstore, and first thing I do is fan the pages. And if the book looks unreadable, um, I'm sorry to say it could be a great book, but it's too taxing for my eyes. Yeah, and let me compliment Kimberly Martin at Jira. One of the readers, in fact, contacted me and said, how pleasant to see an adequate typeface and good space between the lines. I reported that to Kimberly, and she was very pleased at the compliment.
Fabulous. Do you know what font is
I
used?
don't know.
No.
I
Okay.
don't know. And I haven't. I should have asked.
We could certainly find out because we can reach out to Kimberly at Jira, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There you
Yes.
go. Okay. Any advice about writing tools? So I'll tell you a little bit about when I started a couple years ago. The first thing I thought I needed to do, okay, I need a writing program. I don't want to just use Microsoft Word. I think I need a novel writing program. That's going to make me a better writer. Silly me. So I started researching different writing apps for world building, for editing, just for writing. And as I got further into it, I realized you don't really need anything special to write. I mean, it was done with pen and paper not so many years ago on a typewriter. And do you have any advice for your writing specifically about apps or software or, any of those things?
You know, I don't use any of them, Keith. If I were starting now, I probably would have. I would look at them, but I would say to get a big notebook, maybe one of those moleskin notebooks.
Okay.
They're not cheap, but they're very good quality. And I would I would draw even a trajectory. This is a novel, and I'm talking.
Sure.
I'm speaking, of course, as a mystery novelist.
Yeah.
And in mysteries, you want to have a satisfying conclusion. Some novels just leave you hanging at the end, and some people like that. I don't. But put it this way: to draw a line from the bottom of the page diagonally, lower left up to the top. This will be a trajectory. Put that on one page, give it a whole page with an arrow to the top. There's your end, from your beginning to your conclusion. And that line indicates building. You're building all the way.
Okay.
Now, here's some good advice given to me by by another novelist. He said you can start off like a rocket, get your characters, in motion, and at the end, it just almost comes in for a landing itself. He said it's the middle that needs constant re-energizing, and that's worth knowing. The beginning and the end almost can fire up themselves, but the middle will need help, and you need to know that going in. Turn the page to the next couple pages, and start making a not just a list of your characters, but a chart on who they are and where they fit. Here's an example, a personal example. I have my silver heiress, Val. Her father is deceased, so he will not be a presence in the book, except in her memory. Maybe as a beginning novelist, I'm thinking of this writer we're talking about here. You have such a character who is a presence, but not in the book. In whose mind will that character be a presence? I don't want to say a ghost. I want to say somebody who's living in the soul and mind of one of your main characters. Who would that be, and why? And why? And then who are your other major characters? And how do they fit? You have a jigsaw puzzle you're going to put together. And it's not going to be one of those 1,000-piece jigsaws that takes 4 months to complete on a card table in a corner of the room. No. These are big pieces. It's almost child-sized jigsaw, but the pieces are your characters. And what's their problem? What's going on? And why should we care? And I put that out in a sort of print on that moleskin notebook page. Why care? Question mark. And then this is a book that's helpful for me, for any I think any beginning writer.
Okay, awesome.
It's called The Writer's, that's apostrophe S, Body Lexicon.
Writer's Body Lexicon.
It is about 500 pages of body parts, noses, hips, feet, legs, eyes, eyebrows. I mean, all of it. Here's why it's a shortcut 500 pages. You're bringing characters in, and what do they look like? Each one. You could spend more time than you need to bringing these characters onto the page. The author here, and I'm going to email this to you so you don't have to deal with it. Kathy Steinman, and there are lists and lists of adjectives. I turn to it fairly frequently, and sometimes I have my word before I get to it. But oh, blessings! So I would say, have that book at hand, and have faith that at the end, when that diagonal line straight up is just about to conclude, it's going to work for you. But bear in mind that you need to re-energize your book in the middle. And that is every writer's challenge. And think of how many words. There is a brilliant Irish writer right now. Her first name is Claire, Claire. I'm going to email this to you. Keegan, Keegan. Her novels are about 100 pages. She's fantastic. Every word counts. Unimaginable. Um, um, the novelist E.M. Forster said, uh, a novel needs to be 70,000 words. I'd say not necessarily. That's about mine, or a little over. Maybe this next one will be a little less. I'm not sure. But however they are, whether you're a 100-page novelist or much more, in the middle, you need an energy boost. You need your Red Bull right there in the middle. And so go back to that diagonal line, bottom to top, and in the middle, put a couple of little X's. And that's the signal that you need. Maybe a new plot twist, some new character comes in some way, there's a disruption that requires almost a new start. And I was told that uh, the the engine needs to be restarted in the middle.
Fabulous advice. You hit the nail on the head there. Yeah, exactly how I'm feeling personally.
And and
Anyway.
and what you need to know is that it's every writer's problem, challenge.
Yeah, good to know.
And it's Steve Womack who told me that.
Wow, that is
And
such great advice, and I'm hoping that listeners will hear that. I mean, I guess I've heard it before that a lot of writers go through the same problems in writing their novels. So
I do take comfort. I think all of us toiling away,
yeah,
we're all in this same boat in the middle. Uh-oh.
right. Yeah, I
Yes,
agree.
yes, yes.
All right, so you've got book 8 you're currently working on, but how much unpublished or unfinished work do you have? I know you talked about writing when you in your younger years, and you say they're rotting in a landfill and in a shredder, so on and so forth. But
Well, I will I should fess up. Uh, Along about the turn of the century, I had a little run of mystery novels, but set in Nashville, Tennessee, and they were traditionally published. New American Library, and then I did a couple set in Boston,
yeah,
uh, and Warner Books published them. And and then I then I got so seriously interested in Jack London and in writing nonfiction that could sound more novelistic, and I left off. And my juvenilia, I came upon one when my husband insisted that we stop paying for a storage unit, um, and and went to the unit, and he pulled out this and that, and held it up and said, up or down, and I think it was two or three novels from way back when went into the landfill.
oh dear. Okay. So what's next for you? Talk about book 8 a little bit here.
Well, here's what I'm thinking. All right.
Okay.
Only people who read book 7 are going to get this. And
Oh,
book
you mean get this, get what you're going to say, or get book 8?
will understand the trajectory, but let me try to spool it out a little bit.
Okay.
My character Val, and she's so rich that really money is no object.
Right.
She's inherited from her late father this fortune, and she cares. I'm going to use the phrase social justice, and setting up her children's camp in the Hudson Valley on property that she bought, and the camp is underway. And these are kids from the Lower East Side of New York. They were what Jacob Riis, in his book How the Other Half Lives, profiled. He photographed. He climbed the tenement stairs with his phosphorus, firing camera, And his book, he was a newspaper editor, a Danish immigrant, Jacob Riis, Riis. And so these are the kids in the summertime at Val's camp in the Hudson Valley. But she's starting to think about these kids as they grow up. Will they have training? What might be their livelihoods? And she's thinking of what we would call today of a string of motels. There is a road. At first, it was an Indian trail along the Hudson River. Then it became a stagecoach route called the Albany Post Road, starting from Manhattan. And then there would be a stop at a tavern that everybody knew at the time, the Black Horse Tavern, just a few miles out of Manhattan. And now it might well be an automobile road. And there are road houses, there are buildings along the way of this road that might be stopovers for automobilists. Maybe there'd be some automobile races and some automobile touring and staying for the night. Suppose the children growing up, getting into their teens, and bear in mind the lifespan is about 40 years old.
Right, yeah.
That Romeo and Juliet were what, 14? So suppose Val can set up inns with restaurants and lodgings for the night. And some of these young people could learn the trades of cooking, of management, and earn their own livings. And that's a grand plan that she's going to have. Bear in mind that the Hudson Valley has the great names of the Knickerbockers, the Livingstons, and the Van Cortlands. And maybe some of the Vans don't want to see the Albany Post Road with their acreage nearby turned into a tourist destination for motor cars. Suppose there's sabotage. Suppose there might be murder. And there I go.
You set it up very well. Cecelia, I'm going to give you a moment here to read a small piece just to really give us a taste of your writing style and your books.
Thank you for this invitation, Keith. And I'm looking at the novel that's going to come out in just a couple months at the end of our New Year's, January, A Gilded Redwood Coffin. And I'm going to mention a secondary character who is also a recurring character. And this is an issue for beginning novelists, all novelists, to think. Who are the characters who might recur in a series, who readers enjoy encountering again, and why? This is Cassandra, or Cassie, Van Forster, who is a multi-generation blue blood, one of the Schuyler clan, and she has become a very good friend of Val. What is special about her is that from childhood, one of her nannies, infancy really, from infancy, her nanny from the islands taught her about unseen worlds, visions. We would call it paranormal powers that her parents find alarming. They've tried to rid her of these visions that seem to come and go. They have sent her to the leading specialists. She is now married to a scientist. She has 2 children. They have 2 children, but her scientist husband is often on expeditions in the Pacific looking for fossils. I say this because it's important that she sometimes, in some of the books, be managing her household or children herself. In this passage, and it's late in the novel, Val is at risk of being arrested as an accessory for murder. Her close friend Cassie has come early from the summer in Newport to be nearby because of her forebodings. She says during a visit, the 2 friends are together. Val and her husband Roddy feel themselves to be imperiled. Here's the quote, here's the passage. My friend's voice trembled and her gaze locked on mine. I had forebodings, Val. I could not brush them away. Try as I might, they came both day and night. I am here in the city early because of them. You must be more careful, you and Roderick. You must be careful and fearful. I wish you both had the gift of fear. And there is a book, Keith, titled The Gift of Fear, and it's by a man who now runs a security service. It was on the bestseller list. The whole point of it is we have suppressed our powers of intuition to our peril. There are times when we need to be crude, trust our gut. I had such a moment in an upper floor in the Vanderbilt University Library. It was late at night. I was looking for a book, and I passed in the stacks a young man who sort of gave me the creeps. I passed by and I passed again, and I thought, why am I uneasy? Mm-hmm. And I realized he wasn't looking for a book. He was just standing there looking. I called on the red phone downstairs, send somebody up to floor 9. There's a young man here who's something uncertain.
Right. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So the gift of fear, and I think it's a worthy book. This man grew up cultivating in a violent household that very trait, and I have assigned it to Cassie, Val's good friend, so that Val can be warned from time to time and deserve that warning. It's not frivolous. I never use it. And let me say this for a writer, any writers listening in. When you endow a character with a characteristic, even if it's eccentric, it's not a plaything. You need to have some belief in that very trait that you have bestowed on your character. So I'm not a psychic, but think of how many coincidences when you're thinking of somebody miles and miles away,
right,
and they get in touch with you at that very moment.
Right, for sure.
I don't discount those moments. So that's my lesson.
I have the link to ccbooks.com on the Brewing Fiction Podcast website. Is that the best place for people to find your books and to find out about
It
your
really
books?
is. It really is, yes.
So that's cecebooks.com for anybody who's interested. Check out Cecelia and her writing. Cecelia, it's been an honor and a pleasure chatting with you today. I've learned a lot about writing from somebody who I feel your passion. I can see it in how you speak and how you talk about your characters and how you talk about your books. You've taught me a lesson today, and I'm hoping that other listeners will feel the same way.
And Keith, let me say, you're working on 2 books.
2 books.
You're doing the same thing. Hold on. Stephen King works on multiple projects simultaneously, and he situates himself in different places for each project. and I passed that along. I don't know whether you can do it or do it, but I think that was a good idea when I saw what that his writing practice is like that. Yes, and his book on writing is superb.
Yes, I have it near me right here. Yeah, I keep that. I've thumbed through this many times. Yeah. Cecelia, thanks so much, and I will stay in touch. I'm going to keep an ear to the ground for your newest book. I do have a copy of your latest one, Death in a Gilded Frame.
Well, you could just have a quick look. Let me just mention the mystery books that I was writing in the aughts, and Warner Books had an audiobook version. From the first sentence, when I heard the narrator, I knew she was the wrong voice.
Yes.
Just so life, we hope, is long. At whatever point that you might have a book of yours produced, try to have some say over the voice. Is it right for your book?
Right. That's great advice. I've had books where I couldn't finish for that exact reason.
Yeah.
The narrator, and maybe the book was fantastic, but the narrator wasn't, and it ended up ruining the experience.
All the difference,
for sure.
Right. I know I know we need to go. It's been so good to talk to you.
It's fantastic, and you're just you have this energy, which I love, and I appreciate you so much.
Listen, the feeling is mutual. I'm so relieved that this connection worked.
I was a little worried there. I looked at it was like 4 minutes after, and I was like, oh dear. Discover Cecelia Tichi's work at ccebooks.com. That's CECEbooks.com. You can also find a link to her website, along with the links of other Brewing Fiction Podcast guests, at brewingfictionpodcast.com. While you're there, explore my author page for details on my debut publication, Short Not Sweet. This microfiction collection, available for pre-order now and releasing February 21st, offers bite-sized tales encompassing classic vampire, werewolf, and witch tropes, alongside stories exploring the darker aspects of humanity. If you enjoy hearing authors discuss their writing journeys and discovering new voices in fiction, subscribe to be notified of new episodes. Thanks for listening. Cheers.